Welcome to the Mason-Dixon Line, where we'll go inside the Saks FLA political poll with our guest, brilliant political strategist Sally Bradshaw on the Republican side and Screven Watson on the Democrat side. And our newest Mason-Dixon poll shows, perhaps not a big surprise in the U.S. Senate race, Charlie Crist handily winning, if the election were today, over former House Speaker Marco Rubio. Any surprises in those numbers?
Well, I think, Ron, that most people expect this to be an uphill battle for Rubio. What's interesting is that he's not known by over 60% of the Republican voters. And so we're a year and a half away from this election, and I think we're all risking something by going out on a limb on any of this data, but thank goodness we have it, because what would we do and what would we talk about if we didn't have these polls? What's interesting to me about the Crist race is that we are in a wrong track environment where Obama has dominated the press and the Democrats in Congress have dominated the press, and yet in a U.S. Senate race, clearly the Republican candidate is crushing his Democrat opposition.
And let's talk about that. We've got Congressman Kendrick Meek against State Senator Dan Gelber on the D side. Meek a little ahead of Gelber now. What about Sally's point and what these numbers show you, Screven?
Well, I think in that race it's not as clearly defined because, of course, Governor Crist has incredible name recognition where Congressman Meek and State Senator Dan Gelber do not. 77% of the people did not know who Dan Gelber was, yet the race is within 10 points. So it's really, really early in that race. I think that race ends up, at this point, Congressman Meek's raising the bulk of the money, getting a lot of the endorsements. So there is a perception at this point that Meek is going to be our eventual nominee, but it's very early to make that call.
All right, but let's go to Sally's point. Can either of these Democrats, say it's Meek, beat Charlie Crist?
Absolutely. I mean,
how's that play out?
This is so early. I mean, I'm a horse racing fan. So you saw the Kentucky Derby. You know, you had all the favorites out front, and then this long shot comes from 20 lengths back to win by 6 lengths. I mean, in this race, number one is we do have this strength in this state that Obama, the legacy that Obama left us, both in organization, which continues to build, and in fundraising that we hadn't had before. And Congressman Meek or Senator Gelber will inherit that. Number two is it's been a long time since Charlie Crist had to run with equal money. If you look back at his races against Congressman Davis in the gubernatorial or in his state in the AG's race, he's never had a glove laid on him of any magnitude. This race will end up with the DSCC's help, will be an equal financed race, and Charlie will have to answer for some things that he's done. 17
months to go, though.
I'm so dizzy from the spin that's coming to my left, I might point out.
And it is to your left.
That's interesting, yeah.
You set us up well. I mean, Barack Obama outspent John McCain 5-1 in the state to barely eke out a victory in Florida. And although we are a year and a half out from a U.S. Senate race and a governor's race, there's no way to look at these numbers and not see something positive for Republicans. We have a very popular Republican governor who's crushing his Democrat opponents. He will have the finances to do what he needs to do and tell his story. So I'm not concerned about Republicans holding the U.S. Senate seat.
But when we tested with Mason-Dixon, Jeb Bush and a possible entry by Jeb Bush into either the Senate race or the governor's race, which he said won't happen. What happened to the numbers?
Well, Governor Bush was governor for 8 years, so he has a long record here of service to the people. And he was an extremely popular governor among both Republicans and Democrats. So it's unfortunate that we can't convince him to come back and help us in this cycle, but he's not going to come back.
But he could own either of these seats if the election were today. But let's go to the governor's race.
Can I one comment on that? It's interesting because Jeb Bush clearly in that primary is the 800-pound gorilla still, which tells you that the Republicans now are still not happy with their choices when Jeb's not there.
No, I think that's unfair. I mean, Jeb Bush was an extremely strong governor who, again, has a long track record of service. But there's no way, Screven, to look at these numbers and not see positive for Republicans.
But what's interesting to me is with Governor Bush's brother's unpopularity as president for 8 years, Jeb Bush's numbers still stratospheric in a mythical matchup in either race. Let's go to the governor's race where two of our cabinet officers, AG Bill McCollum and CFO Alex Sink, are both announced candidates. And in the poll, he's about 2 points ahead outside the margin of error if the election were held today. What do you see in that race?
I think this race is, if you look at it, Bill McCollum has been in service for over, you had said earlier, I think it's 30 years Bill McCollum's 23 years. He's run 14 times in races, 3 statewide, and 40 is all he can get. I mean, and CFO Sink has been in office 20 months, has run one time. This, by the way, is on the heels of $2.5 million that he put up of money out of the AG's office to advertise his name. There's been some controversy about that, rightly or wrongly, but this poll comes on the heels of $2.5 million that he put behind his name, and he still only
sounds
gets
like
40%.
a campaign issue for the race. Sally?
Sounds like he's headed that way. Screven knows he's run statewide races, that Florida is a really unique state. We have new voters moving into the state every day, and the only way you get known statewide is to be a sitting governor or be a sitting U.S. senator. And so we have two candidates, both of whom ran statewide for the cabinet, who are looking at this governor's race, appear to be their likely, nominees for their party. And what's amazing to me about the Mason-Dixon numbers for Bill McCollum is the tremendous shift in a month. I mean, even as Alex Sink has approved her position in terms of her favorables and unfavorables and whether or not she's known, she is now down to Bill McCollum by 6 points. But if you go below those numbers, if you go below the surface, you find some information that's even more encouraging for Bill McCollum. I mean, he's carrying independence by 10 percentage points over her. No one wins statewide, Ron, without carrying independence.
Well, I don't know how you get that, because when you look at these numbers, 50% of the people don't even know who Alex is. And she's only run, like we said, one time. He's run all these times, and he's only at 40.
Neither candidate has spent any money in this race, and that will come. And McCollum's going to be formidable fundraising, particularly because of good numbers like this. There's something else that's interesting, too. In the last month, with neither candidate spending any money in the race, Bill McCollum has significant crossover appeal. And the complaint that the Democrats have had, or the critique of Bill McCollum, is that he can't get Democrats to support him. 17% of Democrats are supporting McCollum in this poll. 6% of Republicans are supporting Alex Sink. He has a 3-to-1 advantage in crossover. That is significant.
That'll last about 2 seconds when you remind them about his behavior on the floor in the impeachment hearings.
Well,
All those Democrats.
This is the real slugfest right here.
You don't think people will look at Alex Sink's record as an employee, an officer of the Bank of America, and bring that up as an issue? It's a little difficult to say right now what's going to stick to what.
She's been in the banking business in 10 years, number one. Number two.
So she doesn't take responsibility yet. You're going to blame Bill McCollum
I
for
hate to
having been a
inject
member of
myself
Congress.
into this conversation, but we're going to have to wrap this up. Take a step back, looking ahead to November 2010, 17 months away. It appears that McCollum and Sink may get their nominations without a bruising primary battle. But there's a lot of ground to cover between now and November, no matter what it looks like now, wouldn't you say? Yeah,
I think we all have to take a step back and realize that polls are going to change. They're going to be up and they're going to be down, and you'll be talking about different things every couple months as you take a look at this. But as a Republican, I'm very encouraged by these numbers, and I think Bill McCollum has to be as well.
I think, as Sally said, these numbers will change dramatically probably over the course of us looking at this in the next 18 months. This will be a close election. Either way, this will be a very competitive race. Each campaign can take away something from these numbers. It is so early yet. And we'll have a lot more to talk about on the Mason-Dixon line. Thank you, Sally Bradshaw and Screven Watson. We'll be back with you to do more of this. Thanks to you, and good luck to you and your candidate.